clear now. I see possible futures.
You can see.
All at once. Our enemies are all around us, and in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
The battle for Arrakis took everyone by surprise. There were no witnesses. All died in the dark. In the shadows of Arrakis lie many secrets, but the darkest of them all may remain. By morning, the Atreides were no more.
Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration.
I am Paul Atreides, son of Leto Atreides, Duke of Arrakis.
Wadib, the prophet, the one who points the way.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own.
The holy war spreading across the universe like unquenchable fire. A warrior religion that waves the Atreides banner in my father's name.
You've been a desert made me afraid!
We gave them something to hope.
That's not hope!
Consider what you're about to do, Paul Atreides.
Silence! I'm pointing the way! I am Paul Wadib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis! Huna'i! A war in my name!
Fanatical legions worshipping at the shrine of my father's skull.
Who's that ass suck? Who's now fixed? Everyone's shouting my name!
He was a man who believed in the rules of the heart. But the heart is not meant to rule.
My road leads into the desert. I can see it.
Dune was set up to imprint on you, the reader, a superhero. I wanted you so totally involved with that superhero and all his really fine qualities. And then I wanted to show what happens in a natural, evolutionary process and not betray the reason or process. Dune and Avengers Doomsday are both releasing on December 18th, this creating another situation very similar to that of the Barbenheimer. Only in this situation, instead of Barbie and Oppenheimer, we instead have Doomsday, with two of the biggest sci-fi IPs clashing together in theaters on the very same day. And yes, I called the MCU sci-fi, don't at me. Either way, we'll presumably be following two angry and powerful individuals who are likely to utilize their power to carve a path through the systems that created them. Only one character is basically someone who's rising from exile and becoming a legendary leader whose choices will echo across the stars, and another character who, as far as we could tell, is just Tony Stark, but a bad guy. No, I'm sure Doomsday will have some tragic story of how Tony Stark's world fell apart and him turning to the dark side to try to correct and control these incursions that are probably bringing so many heroes together. But let's not sit here and pretend that this was the MCU's grand narrative plan since its inception. But that does raise the question, does Dune's narrative build-up actually play a benefiting factor in this sort of Doomsday theatrical war? Or is the MCU's solid, if not very repetitive narrative structure enough to bring audiences back and help Avengers win out at the end of the day? Either way, I'm not really here to sway you on what you should go be watching December 18th, nor will I judge whatever you choose to watch altogether. If you want to watch Avengers, you aren't a chud who lacks critical thinking or media literacy, and if you want to watch Dune, you aren't a pretentious film snob who can't relax and enjoy the simple things. Both of these films are honestly bringing a lot of solid reasons to the table on why you should go watch them. I just wanted to simply share some of the reasons why personally, when the time does come to choose between the two, I'll definitely be watching Dune before I watch Avengers Doomsday. And I'm someone who genuinely loves the MCU. I grew up with it, and when I finally started to get to know my dad, it was one of the first things we got to bond over. And when they started taking their films more seriously with Iron Man and Hulk, we were always hitting each other up with news or theories based on the reports or speculation for where the projects could go. But after a while, with so many movie ideas and plot lines that have been rumored and failed to come true or never saw the light of day altogether, looking at you, Blade, you just sort of lose interest after a while when you realize a lot of these projects won't lead to anything significant and more often than not are simply just there to bring in another paycheck. While in contrast to that, for as long as I've been keeping up with Dune, I've always been pleasantly surprised by its narrative. And while the books are really solid conceptually speaking, I'm definitely more of a fan of the movies altogether. From the obvious impeccable acting, to its astonishing cinematography, to its Hans Zimmer sound design that truly helps immerse yourself in an entirely unknown and desolate alien world. But more than any of that, I truly appreciate its consistent narrative and focus on its characters and their actions. They truly feel like every decision they make impacts the future of an entire galactic empire altogether. There's so much effort put into telling these stories that they literally took the first book and split it in half, taking the arguably more boring section of the book and turning it into a film all in of its own. On paper, this shouldn't work, and I think a lot of execs and producers would agree, and that's why we haven't seen many Dune projects brought to the screen in a long time. And for most people unfamiliar with Dune, the first movie didn't. A lot of people had slept on it and considered it a sort of boring film altogether. But over time, as its popularity grew and book readers continued to give their seal of approval, we have finally reached the point today where Dune is officially a household name. And it's all because of the attention to detail and obvious effort they put into telling this story altogether. While they do take their liberties within the story, and it's not a direct one-to-one adaptation of the book, what matters is the effort you put into telling a good story. And sure, Avengers or MCU films used to put in this sort of effort into their narratives, back when they were treating the entire franchise more as a creative experiment than a simple cash cow to milk consistently. But over time, we've seen how the latter is the primary reason they even make these films anymore. And honestly, I think that's because of the oversaturation of its characters. Dune tells a pretty grand story over a series of many years, but it has very few characters that we really focus on throughout. Versus Marvel has so many characters that they single-handedly set a fake standard amongst the industry that insinuates you can easily make a spin-off for any and every character. This same mentality has expanded to other superhero IPs like we've seen with the DCU and the Mr. Terrific spin-off we're getting. I liked Superman at all, but he was the last guy I was expecting to get his very own show. It seems a lot of the mindset for these industry folk and execs is that if they can hire some decent writer or even some cheap writer and create a fun story with Marvel's tried and true and never tiring formulaic narratives, while simultaneously dropping a few crumbs of a connection to a bigger movie down the line, or at some point just another character as they become, like I said, way too oversaturated with characters, that now they officially have no real narrative direction they've been building towards. I mean seriously, not only have we had several MCU movies not address Doctor Doom as a character whatsoever, but we've also had an Echo spin-off, a What If spin-off, a What If spin-off, and several years of projects that are apparently all leading to Doctor Doom, but have had no narrative implementation of the character whatsoever. And yes, I get it, Doctor Doom is a pretty major character when it comes to the comic books. But when it comes to the MCU, he has absolutely no tether to any of the ongoing stories within it. The only connection we really have is that Robert Downey Jr. was cast as the villain this time, which also just really feels like a desperate effort to bring people back into theaters to watch. Putting millions of dollars for actors to return, and even more than that for a single actor to return, as opposed to putting any of that money towards original projects or spin-offs that people actually want to see. I'm looking at you, Blade. I mean, after Thanos, they tried to set up Kang as the next big bag, only that has literally gone nowhere. And sure, you could argue that this is due to the behind-the-scenes controversy with Jonathan Majors, but let's not forget that my guy had one full movie where he got to be the main villain, and even the narrative failed as both an expression of his intimidation factor and as a villain origin story altogether. And the most tragic thing of this entire potential plotline they're bringing with Doomsday and Secret Wars is that I can't really see them bringing a satisfying conclusion to any of the characters that could top the conclusion a lot of these characters got in Endgame. Is Doctor Doom gonna be killed and we're gonna see Iron Man die yet again, only this time he was a villain? Is Steve Rogers gonna go through time again and settle down with Peggy? Or is he gonna sacrifice himself like a hero to try to stop Doctor Doom? Or what's even more likely is that reality shifts and changes so much that they get a fresh reset to the MCU altogether. Either way, I just can't see them bringing a narrative conclusion that is as satisfying as what we got in Endgame. And Marvel is one of those properties where the universe can persist even after certain characters have come and gone, but these characters need to have planned arcs before their story ends and their legacy continues either in other characters or what they established. But when it comes to Marvel, that's never going to be a guarantee, because while you could have a perfect conclusion to a character's story, there's always room to bring an actor back in the future of the franchise, even if you simply stamp their character as an alternate version of themselves with a few shots of a background story to fill in the gaps. Whereas when you go back and look at Dune, you have an actual nice compact narrative with a very fitting beginning and end for many of its layered characters. And I want to specifically highlight some of the changes the movies decided to take here as opposed to the books. While the books are great, I definitely am one of those people who got more out of the films and their subtle changes to the story. For example, Chani's story, and how the changes for her character not only fit the story well, but made her more endearing. Rather than being collateral damage and a tragic side piece to Paul's journey into power, Chani now has a lot more agency and emotional impact on all the events of Dune altogether. But I get more into her character and potential changes in the original Dune video I did. Either way, a big reason I'm more excited for Dune than Avengers Doomsday is the idea of consequences for the hero's victory. Well, like I stated earlier, Paul Atreides went from having power to becoming an exile to following all of his mentor's footsteps and gaining power himself again while reluctantly following this golden path that simultaneously is terrifying to him and a lot of times seemed like the only real option Paul has to make, making him this ethereal religious holy figure who doesn't really want to be, where every one of his decisions are made because of the cultures and people around him, or even just affect the cultures and people around him that we can see on screen. While in the MCU, notice how the heroes are never really even praised as heroes. Sure, we get some scenes where they're in the midst of battle and they happen to save someone with innocents who happen to witness the act, who clap for them. But more often than not, MCU heroes are either ignored, judged, or simply looked down upon altogether. And I'm not saying it's unrealistic for some of these heroes to get some hate no matter what they do, especially with characters like Wanda. But as a citizen, when you look at a guy like Tony Stark, you'd think he'd have a lot more fanboys considering how many people out there today in our own world suckle the teat of tech billionaires. Now imagine if Tony Stark's character arc was less oversaturated with other heroes' plot lines, and we got to see him as the true leader or the face of the Avengers. Maybe after New York and all the technological innovations he provides to society, he could be seen as a hero. And then we could see him make a dramatic fall with his mistakes with Ultron. And I get it, in Civil War they did have one small moment where somebody from Sokovia was really upset with him due to the Ultron events. But realistically, way more people should have been upset with that guy. While this would have been a little bit of a deterring factor from the happy Disney vibe they always give their movies, I would have much preferred a story where we could have seen Tony Stark maybe struggle less with his personal physical problems and more with the problems and impacts he's had on the culture and society of planet Earth altogether. How does he retain being a hero when his ego is in shambles after the world is turned against him due to Ultron? Him choosing to go out and live in a cabin and start his own family in isolation would have made a lot more sense, as he would have needed to get away from the world. And it would have also made his choice to sacrifice the life he built with his family and even his own life altogether to use the gauntlet at the end of Endgame that much more devastating. And while the MCU does slightly touch on some of these potential aspects, narratively it just feels like more of an obligation that these heroes get involved than any real personal reasons or stakes. Sure, protecting planet Earth is important because they also live on planet Earth, but it would have been nice to see more worldly reactions to the absolute power and impacts these godly-like figures actually make. Instead, most of them are on the sidelines until a threat comes along and they're strong enough to be able to stop it or at least make a film out of it. Then you look at characters like Paul Atreides, who was also seen as a hero and because of that lost a lot of control and agency he had in a lot of his plans. People literally had so much faith in him as a holy figure that he could literally tell them to not listen to him and they still would. We get to see the consequences that happen when you become literally one of the most powerful people on the entire planet, both in physical and mental power, but also in social power and prowess. Something Tony Stark definitely had and we never saw narratively utilized. Now, giving these MCU heroes a grittier and darker storyline like this potentially would have changed the MCU as a whole and probably would have turned a few people away. And that is where my personal bias kind of comes in. I'm someone who is a huge fan of characters like Paul Atreides being the reluctant holy figures and just seeing the consequences of their actions. Another property that does this very well would be that of Warhammer and what they do with the God Emperor within that franchise. which I guess could even play further into my bias, because at the end of the day, you throw in a medieval sci-fi aesthetic in front of my face and I'm gonna be intrigued. Whether it be Raised by Wolves, Scavenger's Reign, or even Foundation, which also has some aesthetics that are very resemblant of Warhammer at times. And Lord knows, once they finally start dropping some Henry Cavill Warhammer stuff, I'm gonna be all over that. And sure, Marvel movies may be fun and will always have an enjoyable moment or two with every film, it will never hold a candle to the narrative that is as powerful and consistent as that of Dune. A series that focuses on its characters, its themes, and the world it inhabits, while following a narrative that shifts the reality the story takes place in altogether as the characters grow and make these mistakes or choices. That's why come December 18th, I'll be returning to the sands of Dune. And I think we can all agree that once Doomsday hits and we get this big clash of theatrical releases, the only real winner is going to be Florence Pugh, who's definitely making bank that day.
Tell me, please, what do you fear?
You rule the wars spreading across the universe like unquenchable fire. A warrior religion that waves to Atreides' banner in my father's name.
Fanatical legions worshiping at the shrine of my father